How do you build a company and how do you lead that company where organizational objectives and individual contributor objectives come into alignment? I don't know if you've ever asked that question that way, but I find that is a lot of what people are trying to do in the world today. Many of us have worked in environments where organizational objectives were really the only thing that mattered. And as an employee, it was your job to come into alignment with them, to figure out how to take whatever it is you're bringing and put it to work for the benefit of the organization. Now, that works. That's a thing. Organizations often have good goals and they want to get them done and they hire people to help get them done. But over the years, we've begun to understand that we can't just hire people's skills. We have to hire their motives as well. And when their motives don't align, the tools we've developed to get access to their skills and leave their motives behind, well, they work, but they don't produce the best work. They don't produce the best quality. They don't produce the best innovation and creativity. And as we go into, as our economy continues to emerge and creativity and innovation is increasingly important, we need to learn how to let people bring their motives to work. And when you do that, what you get is people that are doing work using the skills they've acquired over time, but they're doing it from intrinsic motivation, and that produces meaning and purpose in life. Those are happy employees and happy companies. So how do you build an organization and lead it where organizational objectives don't trump individual objectives, but where the two come into alignment with each other? Well, what's fascinating about that question is we've been asking it for decades. Back in the 50s, Abraham Maslow put together a book. Actually, it was published much later. What he put together was a set of journal entries. He spent, I think it was a summer, traveling through a bunch of industrial companies. Maybe it was just one. I have to go back and read the introduction again. And he just wrote a bunch of journal entries, and it was his observations. Well, that book has been published 37 years later, and it's called Maslow on Management. And it's loaded with all sorts of insights and interesting observations. But one of them is a thing he says, he talks about synergy. It's in a section on enlightened economics and management. So enlightened meaning, we've shed new light on something and we can see it more clearly, a little differently, and we want to operate differently. And this is in the 50s. He's writing this, 1950s, and it's still something that we're trying to figure out today. And one of his things, he says, you have to assume, to operate from enlightened management theory, you have to assume synergy. That was his word for it. You have to assume that there's a synergy going on between personal objectives and organizational objectives. But to do that, what you have to assume is that, or synergy assumes that you have dissolved the dichotomy between selfishness and unselfishness, or between selfishness and altruism. We've got this dichotomy in our mindscape right now that people are selfish or they are unselfish, and there's a continuum there. And that the more selfish you are, the less unselfish you are. Or the more altruistic you are, the less selfish you are. And he's like, that isn't helpful. What's helpful is to dissolve that dichotomy and build an organization where an individual, when moving towards their goals, moving towards what they want, their own self-interest, can't help but also be moving the organization or others towards goals. And vice versa, the individual that is altruistic and philanthropic, in doing those things, can't help but also be moving towards their own self-interest. If you can create an ecosystem where that's true, you've created enlightened management or synergy. That's a beautiful thought to me. The idea that you could create an organization where people can't help but help each other while also helping themselves. I mean, imagine what it would be like to lead in that environment. One of the theories of motivation or how do you create change is this thing called force theory. And it's a great idea. It's a little metaphor. Imagine you have a ship at sea and it's got sails up. It's a sailboat. And it is moving It has winds that are blowing into its sails that help move it forward, and winds that are blowing against it that resist its progress forward. So you have helping winds and hindering winds. And if you have 4 of these drivers moving you forward and only 2 things that are resisting you, you'll move forward. If there's 4 of these and 4 of these, you kind of are stagnant. But if there's 4 things that are hindering you and only 2 things driving you forward, you move backwards. And so analyzing and looking at what are the helping forces and what are the hindering forces, and trying to increase this and decrease this, and that creates change and motion in your organization. It's a good theory. It's a good idea. It's a good analysis that you can do when trying to create change in an organization. One of the things I find interesting is that for many organizational objectives, one of the things that is causing them, hindering progress the most, is your employees' personal objectives. The organization is trying to move forward and they run into resistance from the very people that they need to help them move forward. On the other hand, when individuals go to work, they often have a set of personal objectives. They have personal goals. They have their own personal ship at sea, and they're trying to blow it forward in life. And very often, the organization's objectives are the things that are blowing against them. The very company they're working for is diminishing their ability to get what they want in life. What if we got everybody's goals on the same ship? Then my own personal drive to go after what I want in the world would be blowing into the same sails that the organization I work for is blowing into to get what they want. That would be an amazing place to work. So Maslow writes about this enlightened leadership, this enlightened management style, where you assume synergy in an organization. And I think a lot of us are trying to do that today. I think we're still trying to figure that out. In my experience, we're still not very good at it, but we're making progress. We're having the right conversations. But Maslow gives us almost a prophetic warning. He speaks into the future to remind us, while this is a nice idea, it is not simple. He said, synergy is anything but simple. And that's true. It's hard to figure out how to get all of this aligned. It requires people that are participating with a degree of health, both emotionally and psychological health. It requires generosity. It requires a shift of belief systems and mindsets, which can be some of the hardest things to shift. I do think we are making those shifts, but he says synergy is anything but simple because it requires us to lead from intrinsic motivation as a primary mode of leadership. You know what is simple? Is leading with external motivations. External motivations are punishment and reward systems. It says, as the organization, we have a set of objectives that we want to get met. We need all your skills to show up to meet those. I don't care if you really want to or not. What I want is your skills. And so I will punish you and reward you to get you to meet my objectives. Rewards are things like compensation, bonuses, raises, promotions, approval, recognitions, retirements. All that is everything that we currently call compensation. And benefit programs are external rewards to get you to do something that I want done. On the other hand, we can also punish people. Demotions, write-ups, public shaming, which goes on in companies, call-outs, negative call-outs, and of course firing people. We use these 2 punishment reward levers to try to get organizational objectives met. What Maslow is writing about when he talks about synergy is introducing a 3rd lever, the alignment of organizational objectives with personal objectives. And if you get those 2 things into alignment, you can lead from an entirely different place. And it's where selfishness is now, it's where it dissolves the dichotomy between selfishness and unselfishness, puts those 2 things into the same ship, and now together we move forward. It's anything but simple, but I do believe it's what we're trying to figure out.